this meeting to order. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Open forum. Would there be anybody that would like to speak at the open forum? All right. You're more than welcome.
Can I go up here?
Yes.
We good? Hello, my name is Elisha Sanger. I am here to encourage everyone to get out and vote on the Melrose School referendum. And my 2 cents are that I'm not as worried about my kids having the life skills that they need to make it in this world. In fact, I'm not that worried about the kids of the people loudly saying vote no. I may be biased, but people from Greenwald and Spring Hill and the other surrounding small towns are some of the best people on earth. These people are hardworking, they care about their family and their friends, and they care enough to speak for what they believe is right, and this will rub off on their kids. But I am worried about the other kids, the kids who maybe don't have parents to make sure they are learning what they really need to know to be successful in life. I'm worried because these other kids will grow up and be my kids' neighbors and my neighbors, co-workers, employees, bosses, be voting and making decisions that we all have to live with. We need to give our kids the best future we can. Education, exposure to new ideas and experiences, broaden minds and help grow life skills. Skills are developed not only in traditional classrooms, but outside the classroom. Not just in sports, but in FFA, Knowledge Bowl, 4-H, speech, religion youth groups. The more options we offer, the more opportunities our kids have to be involved, practice, and learn life skills. This is how we help our kids. This is how we help our future, by raising the bar and helping as many kids as possible to be as successful as possible. I don't want to fear about the future. I want to take action and do what I can to make a forward-thinking decision for my kids, all kids, for all of us. I don't want to look back in 5-10 years and know we just kicked the can down the road and didn't make the right decision. I'm voting yes, or I voted yes, because I want the best experiences, the most opportunities, and the best school we can give our kids. Because education is a game changer. As Brandon Welly said in Spring Hill last night, the pool and the gym are his classroom. I believe this is an issue and appropriate to bring up here tonight, because in August, only 23% of registered voters voted. So I think we can do better. We need to prioritize this decision and get out and vote. You can vote any school day, 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. at the school, enter door 7. You can also vote here at the Melrose City Center, February 14th, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Thank you. Please vote.
Thank you for being here tonight, Alicia. Is there anybody else that would like to speak? Okay, we're on to the consent agenda. Approve of the minutes, bills, purchase orders, the investments, a couple donation resolutions. One for $100 to the Melrose Fire Department from Mark and Mary Monroe. There is a $1,000 donation to the Parks and Rec Board from the American Legion Post 101. There's a $500 donation from the Melrose American Legion Auxiliary Unit 101 to the TriCap bus. And then there's 2 gambling resolutions, and then there's an RDB project invoice from Stearns County. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. We're on to reports. Police Department monthly report.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. In our December 22 numbers in the traffic area, we had 18 citations, 24 verbal warnings, and 6 written warnings. December 22, we had 193 calls for requests for service. 21 was 264. We ended December this year on ICR 3394, and last year was 3642. So we're down about 240 calls, 248 calls for the year overall. 22 agency assists, which seems to be a bit lower than normal. Especially with December being overall quiet for us, but we had our snow and our cold, so hopefully the snow and the cold kept people home, and that's the only reason that we were quieter, not that we're missing anything. So, any questions?
No? Thank you, Chief. City Attorney report, Scott.
I've got several items. The first one item in my report deals with the craft lot and EAW, and that is coming up as on your agenda later on, so I won't dwell on that one. A couple things came up that are more on the utility side. We're dealing with questions about rates and bills and payments, and properly handling those. The last item we don't have to do anything about. We were included in an action on this property. This is property that has an actual certificate of title, and on the title it lists all the liens, and really this is just an action to reform that certificate to eliminate old obsolete items that are no longer in effect. So reviewed what's before the court, and the city's interests, which are some easements, are protected, and so we don't have to do anything. But we still get notified that there's some action happening with this land. So that's a quick overview, unless you've got some additional questions. I think you got a pretty big agenda, so I won't. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Scott. City planner report, Sheila.
Good evening. Just to summarize the report that you have in your packets regarding Riverside Flats, as Scott just mentioned, the comment period for the EAW is closed and the city's responses have been prepared. They are an action item later in the agenda. I think it is still anticipated that construction will begin March, April. We are anticipating plans and specifications from the developer and permit applications. Quick Trip closed last week on the purchase of the former U.S. Bank, Melrose State Bank property. In discussing things with them, we are anticipating an application for demolition, which should be arriving soon. I've spoken with their architect, and we should be getting building permits as well. They are scheduled to begin construction in July and open in December. I think demolition will probably occur in March, and then site prep is going to take some time. Regarding the capital improvement project over on Railroad West and GC Real Estate Partners for the 72-unit multifamily housing development, we had a special meeting of planning and zoning on January 9th. That is also going to be an item discussed under new business. Last Tuesday, Tuesday, January 9th, we had a big meeting between the city administrator, finance director, street supervisor, wastewater supervisor, electric supervisor, city engineer, and myself. And we sat down and we discussed at length all of our summer project schedule, including Railroad West, Quick Trip, Riverside Flats, and our street improvements. And we discussed at length all of the things, current services, future services, road design, snow removal, easements, problem intersections, and it was really good, a brainstorming session to talk about everything we have coming up. Our next step was working on some locates and working on some preliminary survey information and getting materials, plans, and specs ready on these projects. We have started putting together a request for proposals for updating our comprehensive plan. We hope to have this on the council agenda at your February meeting. Our comprehensive plan has not been updated since 2011, and there's been some significant changes in the city that really necessitate updating the comp plan. And so that is going to be a project coming up here this summer, and So we hope to have that on your agenda next month. We're working on some ordinance and zoning updates to deal with some challenges in Rose Park and other vacant buildings in the city. Worked on some zoning enforcement regarding some temporary accessory structures that were constructed in late fall, which are not permitted by our ordinance. So I've been working with some citizens on that. Some grant applications. We submitted our concept paper that we discussed to the Department of Energy to pay for the dedicated tie line between the southwest sub and the east sub, and eliminating some of the overheads and putting them underground in the original part of town. We're not going to hear for a couple months whether or not that application is going to be accepted. So grant hunting has become something that we're really starting to work on, because there's a significant amount of grant funding out there, and the money is flowing from the federal government because of the infrastructure. It's just a matter of figuring out which of our projects we have planned fit within the appropriate grants. And speaking of grants, on January 11th, we were notified by the Burnick Family Foundation that the City of Melrose received $15,000 for the Sauk River Park improvements. That money we have earmarked when we wrote the grant for purposes of restoring and putting back in a basketball court. So that is our plan for those funds. The park board will be meeting in next week to discuss, where that might go, what that might look like, and additional fundraising we need to do. We unfortunately did have to cancel the bowling fundraiser tournament, but we have received sponsorship of 15 of the fire rings in the new campground, so only 4 are left. That's a little update from when you received your packets. The restroom has been redesigned, and we are hoping to go to bids with that within the next month. And so we took a look at the restroom that was recently constructed in Sauk Center, and there were some really good design features regarding that. They put the mechanical room down the center, and so it's much easier, to get at and for maintenance purposes. So that was the reason for the redesign on that. But we are still hoping, and we plan to get that constructed in the spring down in the park so that we can open the campground. So.
Thank you, Sheila. All right, Mr. Blum, City Engineer Report.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. I helped Sheila with about a third of what she just told you about, so that was most of my month here, was helping Sheila on her stuff. And then plus working on the plans for the 2023 street project. Plans are well underway, surveys in the house and ready to go. We should be ready to bid that bugger in the next, I would say, a month, 6 weeks or so is when we're looking to get that out on the street. So nothing on surprise on the survey that we found, so everything looks like it's going to work out like we planned. So no surprises is good at this point. So short and sweet. Anything for me?
Any questions? No?
Thank you.
Thank you. City Administrator Report, Colleen.
So as Sheila mentioned, we held our first meeting of the year to discuss the wrap-up projects for 22 and plans for 23, including all the capital projects. As she said, that was a very productive meeting for us. Ryan and I attended a meeting in Sauk Center with the Melrose and Sauk Center Ambulance and Centricare. We have been in discussions with Centricare regarding advanced life support transports. The current practice is to have a nurse from Centricare ride along if it is an ALS situation. This practice can no longer continue due to legal liability. Centricare requested that we come up with an alternative plan for ALS transports by March of 23, with an implementation of July of 23. There are 2 different ways this could happen. One is for Melrose Ambulance to become certified as part-time ALS, or to contract with Centricare to provide those transports. This is something that will have to be discussed with the Corps at the regular February meeting, and we will need to put together a cost-benefit analysis to determine which route is financially more feasible and still provides the highest level of patient care, because obviously that's the most important priority. If we do decide to go part-time ALS, that takes quite a while for certification, and there's some other criteria involved in that. So, there's still a lot on the table when it comes to this, but I just wanted you to be aware of that. The wastewater treatment facility, the new completion date has now been moved out to July of 23. I am not optimistic that we're going to be able to meet that deadline, just being very forthright with you. And then we simply have the RDB project punch list items 23. And I don't know, did either one of you end up getting, either one of you get as-bills from them yet? Okay. So we're waiting on the as-bills as well. A couple things just for your consideration. On February 16th, I would like to invite all of the different boards in to a year in review. We typically do that year in review with every committee, and what I'd like to do is just do it all at once and have everyone come here. And then right after that, we'd have the Fire Relief Association meeting where we invite the townships in. And that is the fire department and the ambulance that actually take care of that. And then the other thing, and we can talk about this, but we had talked about doing this prior to probably 2 or 3 years ago. I would like for the council to consider having a spring open house. And what we would do is we would have all the departments kind of set up and people could walk around from the public. They could look at all the street projects that are going on. They could look at the stuff for the Sauk River Park and what's happening. The fire department ambulance can be here. Admin, we could talk about the finance, economic development. So it's just a good way to introduce to the public all the information that is out there and for them to engage directly with the people in our various departments that actually are out on the street or boots to the ground. So, and then typically what we would do is then have them convene that and then come into the regular council chambers, and then they could just ask general questions of the city if they wanted to. So that's something to consider. We don't have to make a decision yet, but I would like us to put that on your radar at least for spring. 2 other things that got set out in front of you today. Ryan and I had the privilege yesterday of getting a rating call from Moody's, and we have been upgraded from I think it was, wasn't it? Yep. From A1 to a double A3, which means that that's also for our bonds and our issuer rating. What that basically means is that is the highest rating that you can get as a municipality of our size. So that is actually very, very good. Part of the precipitation for this happening is they actually changed their methodology for how they went about rating cities and counties. Before, we were kind of all lumped together, and they took, size of cities out and different things like that. So we received this rating for a number of reasons, but it's really our robust reserves, our minimum leverage, our sound financial practices. So that's really all the reasons that our rating is what it is. And what that really means is that when we go out to have to seek bonds for any projects, this is really going to help us in terms of our interest rates, etc. And then the only other thing that I want to mention is I will be down at the Capitol next week for Legislative Action Day for the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities. The top priorities are local government aid, water and wastewater infrastructure, child care, housing, Greater Minnesota business development, public infrastructure, and duty disability are the priority items that Coalition has identified as what they see the legislator having to tackle this year. I am sure there's going to be ample talk about a couple other things that have already gotten passed or very close to getting passed. So I will keep you guys posted. At the next meeting, I'll be able to tell you more about that. So that's what I have for right now. There's some other things later on the agenda. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Sounds good. Development consultant report. Tracy?
So this is hot off the press with Matta having a meeting at 6 a.m. this morning, and a really long day. The update, what Matta talked about is that from a housing perspective, we simply provided just a little bit of background, or I provided a little background on the approval of the housing strategy in 2021. I highlighted the different areas of housing demand that were identified in the most recent housing market study, which was a number of years ago, and highlighted those from the perspective that the highest demands are the ones that have been a priority for myself and staff to be looking at. They include first-time home buyers, general occupancy, very low-income rental, general occupancy, low-income rental, general occupancy high-end rental, and age 55 plus high-end rental. In 2022, the city secured over 30 acres of property, either through a purchase agreement or outright purchase. And the city is poised in 2023 to realize 101 units of multifamily rental housing, partially through the Riverside development and then the other through the Railroad Avenue West housing. We expect, Dave is working on final feasibility, and all of us seem to have our hands in the different elements that need to come together. There needs to be some right-of-way purchased. We need to have our escrow agreement executed with Granite City Granite City real estate developers, our partners, and get that escrow money down and then initiate planning, the platting process. So one of the top priorities, we also talked about the different priorities. One of them was to resolve any issues that were outstanding with the Middendorf property. That is no longer going to happen. The seller has decided not to sell the property, so that is removed from the priority list at this point. We'll see what happens there. In the next item of priority is to initiate an effort to develop affordable single-family housing on the 2 cul-de-sacs on Railroad Avenue West. That will be a time-consuming process. It's expected we'll need to put together a number of partners, but with the city potentially making that investment in Railroad Avenue, the infrastructure, the street, curb, gutter, all of those types of things, while that's being constructed and Granite City is building their multifamily, we'll be trying to organize, again, some single-family development opportunities, affordable single-family development opportunities. Another priority I talked about was working with the developer to secure commitment for a tax credit project in an effort to produce the most affordable units identified in the housing market study. As we talked about that, we talked about there needing to be much more information, education, and communication about what that really means, what kind of, what are the impacts of something like that, examples of projects. But I think when people hear the word tax credit project, this is a project that a number of city staff, officials, Bunker went down and we toured a project that Sand Company did down in Wake Park. It's a beautiful project, and I think that there's not a real clear understanding of how they work. So the emphasis at EDA was, let's do that education, public outreach, all of those kinds of things, and not get the cart before the horse. So we'll be looking at ways to try and figure out what that means and how it could potentially work, and if it's needed in Melrose. The other priority for this year is looking at an infill housing program. Some of the most affordable housing development that you can do is a development where you don't have to build new streets and sewer and water and those kinds of things. And there's quite a number of vacant lots were identified in the housing strategy plan that was done and approved. And so I think we need to go through a little bit more formal process in identifying what those properties are, reaching out to owners, seeing what their intent are, and doing what we can to encourage infill development on those lots, which again is probably the most affordable housing development property that the city has right now. So that, in addition to that, one addition to the agenda was the potential option agreement for industrial park property, and that first right of refusal that we discussed, I believe, at the last city council meeting. The business has indicated that they want to proceed with that, so we'll be looking at having city attorney work on a purchase agreement and that first right of refusal. And with that and other land acquisition disposition issues, we did talk a little bit about the reestablishment of that land acquisition committee. It would be an ad hoc committee, and Sheila and Colleen and I are all talking about what that looked like, understanding how it worked in the past, how could it work in the future, and that representatives be included on that kind of spread the information around so different departments know, council knows, and everybody is communicating about land acquisition. And in the, with the city owning real estate and for housing development, I think the disposition would be a component of that. So we'll write something up. give you some history and have you take a look at that at your next council meeting. That's about it, unless there's any questions.
You said the Mittendorf property fell through.
The owners have decided not to sell it. The purchase agreement will be canceled.
Okay. We've put quite a few hours into that project and
Yep.
money. Just want to express my concern about that. So.
Yep,
Because none of that will be recoverable through a TIF or anything any longer, so
correct.
thank you.
Great, thank you. On the action items, liquor license renewal applications for intoxicating liquor. There's club and Sunday on sale liquor, 3-2 off sale malt liquor. There is a wine license and a 3-2 on sale malt liquor. All applications must be executed, fees paid, certificates of insurance as to liquor liability coverage obtained for the city council. Minnesota state law requires cities to obtain proof of all licenses. Provide workers compensation insurance for their employees. The city must also obtain licensed social security numbers and Minnesota federal tax ID numbers for the Department of Revenue. Is there any questions? Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. WSB contract for letter of map revision. Mark?
Okay, on January 16th, 2020, the city executed an agreement with WSB for work on the RDB project. That agreement is attached. The original agreement was in your packet. Included in that agreement was submitting the as-built drawings once the project was substantially complete to FEMA and to the DNR floodplain division for a LOMAR, which is a letter of map revision. At that time, it was assumed that no CLOMAR, a conditional letter of map revision, would be needed. The DNR had indicated during preliminary discussions that a CLOMAR was not necessary. But then that changed as discussions continued. Once it was determined that a CLOMAR was necessary, that portion of WSB's fee was shifted from the LOMAR to the CLOMAR. So now the LOMAR is still needed to be completed. Attached to the packet is the estimate from WSB for this work. It includes $6,000 for preparation of the LOMAR and the $8,000 FEMA permit fee. The FEMA permit fee was never included in the original WSB contract, so that was always anticipated. So this is just an action item to give consideration to approving WSB's contract to complete this LOMAR process.
All right, can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Magnified financial credit card for the new finance director. If there's any concerns, can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Then resolution number 2023-9 on negative declaration.
I'm sorry, there was two motions back on the magnify thing, so that you guys did the motion to approve the finance director's authorized signer.
Yeah.
You guys also have to give consideration approving as an authorized user and to reaffirm credit limits as stated above to all card holders and the cash rewards.
Okay,
Yep, please, sorry.
so can I get a motion to approve that?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. All right, well, Sheila, we'll let you go with that.
As mentioned before, the comment period for the EAW on Riverside Flats closed on December 22nd. WSB staff, the developer, and the city attorney came together to review the comments which were submitted, and we prepared responses. You have received a record of decision with the proposed submitted comments and responses. The next step is for the council to determine if an environmental impact statement is necessary based on the comments received. And then the decision, findings of fact, and conclusions will be distributed to the necessary agencies. So basically, everybody that commented and everybody that was told that the AW was open will get the resolution of what we found. And so the action item is for council to give consideration to the resolution, making a negative declaration on the need for an EIS for Riverside Flats.
Okay, are you looking at me?
No, you go ahead.
Okay. So anyway, I looked through the whatever analysis provided quite a bit, and I noticed the following permits or approvals will be required for the project. So there's the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers wetland delineation review and possible nationwide permit, if needed. MPCA has 2 different permits, Minnesota Department of Health, a water main permit, Minnesota Department of Natural Resources construction dewatering permit, Minnesota Department of Natural Resources work in public waters permit, Stearns County Environmental Services wetland delineation if needed. My point is this, that there may be some snafus that are encountered along the way with this one. It is awfully close to the water. It's, I think, within like 5 feet of the riverbank. And we can make the determination that we don't need an EIS. But what I want to make sure is that everybody understands that this may get held up with this permitting stuff that needs to happen with the, you don't know. What I want to do is make sure that we are protected as a city so that we don't have, if this gets held up and, they say, no, you're not getting the permit, well, then the project can't go forward. And financially, we're invested, the developer's invested. I want to make sure that we are protected and have an opinion, maybe by Scott or something, that give us a head nod that if we're getting into any financial jeopardy by going forward with this, Right. 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 Okay.
With that, can I get a motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Resolution number 2023-10, calling for a public hearing on the establishment of municipal development district number 13. Approval of the development program related thereof, and the creation of workforce housing tax increment financing district number 13-1. Tracy's coming up for that?
I made the title of that resolution extra long for you, Joe.
Yeah, thank you.
So we discussed this a little bit at the last city council meeting. This is the Granite City Real Estate Partners project where the city had previously called for a public hearing to create a housing tax increment financing district. And because of the income restrictions that go along with a housing tax increment financing district, the developers were concerned that they could make the project work in its proposed scope. They felt that either they needed to find a different route to go as far as how assistance would work, or they'd have to reduce the total number of units. They really believe that the market is solid for 72. And so I did introduce that the Minnesota State Legislature within the last couple of years, 2021, approved a new type of housing, a new type of TIF district called workforce housing. And so in looking at that, the developers are asking that the city consider the creation of a workforce housing TIF district which is a 9-year TIF district, and originally they were requesting 15 years of assistance. And so in order to compensate for the shorter duration of assistance, they'd request that tax abatement be stacked on the back side of that. So in your packets, you have information that runs through basically the statutory requirements of a workforce housing TIF district. It does require additional components with a typical housing tax increment financing district, economic development TIF district, or redevelopment, along with a couple other special ones. The process is completely driven by the unit of government that is creating the TIF district, in this case, the city. Where you draft a TIF plan, you provide the county and the school district an opportunity to comment, but they don't have voting or veto authority on it. With a workforce housing TIF district, statutes specifically require that the county and the school district approve the tax increment financing plan by resolution. So those will be 2 extra steps in the process. It also requires that, that the city make certain findings supporting the district, and number 1 is that that the jurisdiction is not located within the Twin Cities metropolitan area. That is what the definition is. The average vacancy rate for rental housing in the municipality and in any statutory home rule charter city located within 15 miles or less of the boundaries of the municipality has, there's been 3% or less vacancy rate in at least the preceding 2-year period. So this will require a survey of all rental units to determine what those vacancy rates are. Everything we understand today is vacancy rates are 0% right now, and waiting lists that go anywhere from a couple of months up to a couple of years. So I don't think we're going to have a problem meeting that finding. One additional requirement is that at least one business in the municipality or within 15 miles with a minimum of 20 employees, that they write a letter of support and saying the lack of housing is affecting their ability to recruit and retain employees. And the municipality has to declare their intent to use the increments to serve rental housing that helps support your businesses. And county auditor may not certify the tax capacity of the economic development tax increment financing district for workforce housing if the request is made after June 30th of 2027. So again, those are the requirements of the workforce housing. In this particular case, again, the developers have provided some information about what the impact of having the income restrictions, probably the least restrictive of the requirements imposed by a housing TIF district, is that 20% of the units have to be rented to people at 80% of the county median. The other option is 40% of the units have to be rented to folks at 60% of the county median. Again, with a workforce housing, there are no income restrictions, as the legislature saw fit when they created this special authority. So again, the developers have talked about cutting back units. They've provided some, they've done their own market analysis looking at what the wages are, and Melrose is blessed with a really solid business and industrial base. The average or the median household income for a family of 2, I believe it is in the neighborhood of $67,000. So if you took two young folks, making $40,000, $50,000 a year, you would blow through the income requirements of a TIF housing district. And I think those are some of the people that we're really trying to reach now. I wanted to point out some of the major differences between TIF parcels and the, housing TIF parcels and the workforce housing type of TIF district. Again, the statutory duration of a housing TIF district is 26 years. With a workforce housing, it is 9 years. There's the no income restrictions. There will be a greater cost to create the TIF district just because there are additional steps, additional resolutions, the survey, and meeting with the county and school. All of those costs will be passed on to the developer as a part of their assistance request. Other major differences with tax abatement. Tax abatement is the other piece of this. And again, The city is authorized to provide tax abatement. I believe the city of Melrose has only done one tax abatement in the past, and that was in conjunction with some of the fire remediation funds. We did a tax abatement with Ilias's because it was the only way we could funnel through some of the money from the fire remediation grant. So with tax abatement is not, people pay their real estate taxes just like they normally would, and then the city goes through a process, holding a public hearing, passing a tax abatement resolution. Sometimes cities pass abatement plans if it's something that's expected to be repeated, but it's not required by statute. So they hold a public hearing, approve a tax abatement resolution, and then come up with terms of how that abatement is going to work. One of the reasons that tax increment financing is used more predominantly than tax abatement is tax increment comes with significant guidance, regulations, and restrictions. There's a very specific process. There's reporting and those types of things. And tax abatement is a little bit of the Wild West. You know, there is no requirement to only abate the increase in real estate taxes. It can be all of the real estate taxes. There's no limitations really on how it can be used or what types of projects it can be used. So I think as a general rule in economic development, we try to stay away from abatement except for in instances where it's absolutely necessary to make a project come together. Again, with tax abatement, the property owner pays real estate taxes just like they always would. They send their check into the county distributes those taxes to the city, county, and school district. Cities, counties, and school districts have the ability to abate taxes. Stearns County, however, has a policy that they will not provide tax abatement for a project that doesn't have a county-wide impact. I think they've done abatement for pilgrims down in Cold Spring, but they've very rarely participated in. This will be the first time Stearns County has considered a request for workforce housing. So we'll put you on the workforce housing TIF map. I believe there's only been a small handful, less than 10 workforce housing TIF districts done in the state. But again, it's proving to be a tool that can work to meet the identified needs of a community and its housing. State statute limits tax abatements to 15 years unless a county or school say we're not going to go along with it. Then the city has the ability to raise the term of abatement up to 20 years. Again, in this case, we are looking at 6 years of abatement simply to match that term that we initially talked about in the terms letter that was approved by the city and the developer. We're not pursuing tax abatement from the county because they won't do it, and we're not pursuing abatement from the school district because they have not done it previously, and their share of real estate taxes is significantly lower. It doesn't necessarily warrant the extra effort of going through the whole abatement process with them. Like I said, the city has the ability to abate all or a portion of the real estate taxes with the Granite City project. I think we model it just like we would tax increment financing, is if you consider the 6 years of abatement, it would be at 90% of the increase in property taxes. So you're still hanging on to what is probably a very small base, and you're also retaining 10% of future increments or future abatements to cover any ongoing or administrative type costs. There is nothing in legislation that says what a city can or can't do with their administrative fees. You've got the ability to determine what portion of the tax can be abated. In the end, there's very little administrative work associated with tax abatement. You don't have things like annual TIF reports and annual disclosures that have to be published and those types of things. There's a limit on the maximum amount a unit of government can abate. And this would come absolutely nowhere near that limit. It would be minuscule. Again, administratively, then, because there's no reporting or publishing or anything like that, the only administrative actions are that the city has to include a line item in their budget that says, Granite City Real Estate Partner tax abatement for 6 years. You make certain that it's included in your levy, and it shows up as a revenue and an expense line in your budget. Are there any questions about the TIF, workforce TIF or abatement at this point?
This feels, correct if I'm wrong, this feels like a negotiation type thing for us to be discussing. And I believe we can close meetings for negotiating these types of deals, correct? To be talking about abatement is kind of something you'd negotiate in my mind. We're proposing what we're gonna do here out in the open and throwing it out there. And I think, obviously the Mittendorf property, that fell through. I don't know where we sit with the developer right now. I know their name is very familiar to us now, but, we have earnest money down. And we're putting a lot of time and energy into this one already, and money. And I want to make sure that if we're going to start changing what we're doing and negotiating new deals and stuff, that we have something fairly rock solid. And I don't know if we have a letter of intent with some earnest money down or anything like that for this project. So that needs to be clarified in my mind before we continue down this path. And also, obviously, we have right-of-way issues down with that road that we've discussed. There's a lot of question marks. We just keep plowing forward and putting more time and energy into this. I want to make sure that if we continue to spend money and resources and stuff, that we are fairly firm that this is going to happen. So, just something for everybody to think about.
I'm guessing this all went through Matta?
Yes.
We went through it this morning.
Okay.
But the city council has approved a terms letter with the developer for 15 years of assistance. The assistance being requested now, or the change in the assistance, actually reduces the amount of assistance that the developer will receive overall, because we were not capturing the county and school district. So we're within that. As a part of the terms letter, the developer has agreed to enter into an escrow agreement. That has not been executed, but it is top priority because we can't move forward with the planning and on many of the steps that have to take place. That will put $30,000 down just to allow the city to start that process. And in that, once that escrow money is secured, the purchase agreement and development agreement will be drafted. I don't think we would do that if we weren't proceeding with the TIF and abatement. I mean, I don't think we would proceed with the purchase agreement and TIF agreement if we weren't proceeding with this TIF tax, with their assistance request. The terms letter, you may recall, I don't have it right in front of me, is if the developer does X, Y, Z, purchases, X amount of land, and here's the price, builds 72 units of housing, conforms with the requirements, then the city will create a TIF district, provide assistance over a 15-year term. The developer will enter an escrow agreement. They will submit $30,000 to be held by the city in escrow. So the process, I mean, you're not approving something greater than what has already been approved in the terms letter. You're just paving the course that we can take the next step.
Okay.
I think.
When does the escrow, when does that come into play? Obviously you'd like to have something that you can hold on to if stuff falls through.
Yeah, we expect to get that escrow within like the next week. As soon as we're done here, we call for that public hearing. That's our top priority and write the check.
Okay.
This approval was just, this isn't a cost, right? This is just, they're asking if we consider this, we'll consider it, and then they would move forward with the next step, right?
Well, you guys are calling for the public hearing.
You're
Right, but
initiating
I
the
mean,
process.
like, it's not there's no cost other than, Tracy's time and this portion of it, but it's
Right.
other outside.
Yep, so that's why we're getting the 30,000 in escrow, because there is gonna be costs. It's not just Tracy's time, there's gonna be legal involved, there's gonna be planning involved.
Right.
It's gonna be Dave's time, so that's why we need that money to move forward.
But I think part of Tony's moving forward is if we wouldn't approve this, then the project's not as interested in moving forward, right?
Correct. You have to have the TIF, And that's very typical for any of your economic development projects, because the only way this cash flows for them is if you provide a system.
I would concur, though, that I think that, you know, you can call for you can approve the resolution calling for the notices and those types of things that are necessary, because it's a 45-day process, but I would not pursue anything further until we received escrow, and that would put some pressure on them to get it done. The ball is really in our court in getting that escrow agreement to them. So I think that needs to happen as soon as possible, and we don't need to take this necessarily too much further, although the TIF plan will have to be written fairly soon in order to meet the timelines that we're talking about. It will need to be written by the end of January in order to meet the publication and notice requirements. So if we can get the escrow agreement executed in the next week, and I don't see why we shouldn't be able to, I think that is prudent and should be done.
So if we go forward with this, we're not saying what we're doing for abatement. This is just the public hearing that we're doing right now, right? Stearns County doesn't do abatement, just hands out, they're not even going to entertain it. The school doesn't entertain it. And in your mind you go, well, why are we entertaining abatement also? I guess it's an incentive, obviously. But part of the negotiations is, well, can you get the project done without doing abatement?
The answer is no. They won't move forward with the project without the proposed assistance. They're already foregoing, $80,000 a year in assistance for those last 6 years from, $60,000 of assistance from the county and the school district, because it can't be captured by a TIF district. So it was skinny when we started, and without that, it makes it not feasible.
And that's why they asked for it. In legislation, it's a but-for test, and they have to meet it but-for. This is why we would move forward. That's kind of why people ask for the TIF as assistance always.
The council to give consideration to approve resolution number 2023-10. Can I get a motion to approve?
So move.
Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
All right. Just a follow-up on that is the county just got back to me today, and the county, I simply sent them an email asking if they would consider using workforce housing. They forwarded it to their Housing and Redevelopment Authority, who recommended that they do move forward without any further income restrictions. I also heard back from the schools saying we would entertain it. That is not an approval by either of them, but they're open and willing to hear it. So once we get this escrow business straightened out, we'll pursue that kind of education and follow-up process.
And then Tracy, do you want to mention that we would actually have to call a special council meeting to have this public hearing?
We do. I apologize, but I will not be in the state or possibly the country on the date of your March council meeting. I think this is a new enough type of project that I would very much like to be present for that public hearing, and would ask that you call the public hearing for a Thursday, March 2nd, or at some point, not the week of March 11th through the 17th.
I'm fine with it.
You mean February?
It'll have to be updated, yep. Yep. Well, no, and just be corrected. They can approve it with a corrected date. Yeah. Yep. Yes, we did. Yep. Yep.
So do you need that right now?
We do need to know a date in order to, the council can approve the resolution, and we can put in the date that works. But if you're in a position to approve the second, notice everything is driven by when you approve these resolutions. So notice periods, publication dates, those kinds of things. So I'd need to know it sooner rather than later, within the next 3 or 4 days.
So the 16th, so the 9th or the 23rd?
2nd, 9th, or 23rd.
Oh, March 2nd.
Yep.
You
Does March 2nd work for you guys?
Yeah.
Probably.
You're good, March?
Yeah,
I'm gone in March. I was thinking this was in there,
Okay, so 9th. So you're gone, when you leaving?
I'm sorry, the 10th through the 17th, the whole week
February.
of the 17th.
Of February or March?
March.
March.
March,
You said
Oh, March.
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 so.
'Cause
the 9th,
Travis is-
The 9th or the 23rd.
With the 9th or 23rd?
Yep, either of those would work. I apologize, that's the one week of March I couldn't do it.
Okay,
I don't need to be if they all are.
yeah. Can you do the 9th? Because I think 2nd might be dicey for me too.
Okay,
But would that be okay?
yep, that's fine, it's really
Are you
your
okay
call,
with
I
that?
appreciate your
What
consideration.
day?
The 9th?
March, fine,
March 9th?
fine.
Okay,
March 9th. Okay.
thank you.
Motion on that?
Okay, yeah, let's just, can you make a motion on that? Okay.
Second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
All right, thank you.
Okay. All right, ditch repair west, Fifth Avenue Northeast.
Last May, as you know, there was significant rain and storms in our area. This resulted in damage to the ditch area to the west of the properties along Fifth Avenue Northeast across from the high school. A tree was uprooted and there was washout of the bank exposing a utility line and coming close to exposing other lines. And so we have some pictures for you. The tree has been removed, but our main concern is this. So the city administrator and street supervisor Mittendorf met with and discussed the damage with Stearns County, Sauk River Watershed District, FEMA, and the Soil and Water Conservation District. Throughout the summer, we worked with FEMA trying to apply for grant funding, but we were advised by FEMA that this project does not fall within the scope of its grant. Our fear is that the almost exposed lines, because our lines are running where you see those red locates, we have lines there. The fear is that next spring, with all the melting snow and potential storms, the almost exposed lines become exposed. So we received 2 estimates. It is anticipated the cost of this project will be shared with the Utility Commission, as well as possible cost sharing with the other utilities in the area like Arvig and Centerpoint, I believe. The council to consider approval of the estimate from Mayors Inc. for the repair of the ditch project. We're asking this be approved now because they would really like to get the work done while the ground is frozen, before it gets all,
There must be an easement through there for utilities, huh?
yes. Yep, it's our easement area.
Yeah, okay. Kind of hard to move that. What was the estimated cost? 32,000?
32, I believe.
And that's gonna be split,
Split
so
between-
council just needs.
It's going to be
come up
split
with
as well as us
60.
seeking out sharing with the other utilities.
Yeah, and Arvig or whoever.
Yep.
I mean,
Arvig.
I'm sure Arvig will take care of about 30 of it. That's worth a shot. All right,
Can I get a motion?
I'll make
to
motion.
approve?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Parks and Rec board appointments.
As you know, we had one opening left on the Parks and Rec Board, and so we've received 2 applications now. Jose Morales and Dr. Lindsay Shimoleski have both applied. You have their applications in your packet. And council to give consideration to appointing an at-large member to the Parks and Rec Board.
Okay. All right, council. Looking for you guys' recommendations.
I guess they, I don't know, they both look just fine, but, I don't know, I mean, we lost a woman on the board. Maybe be good to have another one on there. It's nice to have their point of view, and maybe different than a man's point of view, so. I'll make a motion to have Lindsay.
Okay, we have a first.
I'll second that.
There's a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. But I would really encourage Mr. Morales to look at applying at any other boards that we also have. It'd be nice to see some nice, fresh faces here. And I do know him, he's a good man, so I
Land
think
acquisition.
Well,
he'll do a good job.
and he can attend meetings if he likes to,
Right.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's true. Yeah, we do.
Somebody at large.
Yeah. All right, well then we're on to old business. I didn't see nothing there. New business, on February 22nd, 2023 at 5:30, the German students are coming to the Melrose City Center. Is that okay with everybody? Okay, that'll work. All right, well then B would be Railroad West zoning. Sheila?
Yes, as mentioned before, in reviewing the plans for Railroad West, including road planning, right-of-way, platting, cost estimates, additional discussions have taken place between staff and our city engineer to allow for greater flexibility in road planning, lot sizing, and other ideas within the area. We are proposing a planned unit development overlay district, which is permitted in our zoning ordinance. It was considered by Planning and Zoning at its special meeting on January 9th. In your packet, we had information about the zoning ordinance and subdivision ordinance. Specifically, a PUD would allow deviation from the subdivision ordinance, and as we move forward with platting, we could consider different lot sizes and other information. You also have information including this one, which is a preliminary layout of the 72-unit housing. So the anticipation from the housing strategy always was that multifamily would be located furthest to the west on this property, and so this will keep with that. The Planning and Zoning Commission has recommended that they move as far west as possible so that the end of the road as we develop it will be the multifamily. At the time, they had an option on 7 acres. It looks like they are looking at between 4 and 5 acres, probably closer to 5. So as we go forward with that, we had plans to put the single family on the east side, and we still do. But because they only need 5 acres out of 7, we're going to have a 2-acre gap. And so Planning and Zoning Commission has discussed this. We are proposing, instead of having a gap on the west, we're going to move them over, and we're going to put the gap in the middle and have an outlot probably in the center for a possible park in the future. Our comprehensive plan calls for parks on that side of town. Eventually, we don't know what will happen to the park near Centricare, and so we think it is prudent to plan for a possible park in that area. And so that's one of the flexibility tools of using a PUD, is that we can plan for stuff like that. So there's no action item on this. I'm just updating you on what Planning and Zoning Commission is planning. Council by consensus to concur with Planning and Zoning Commission that a planned unit development overlay district should be considered for this area. If there's consensus to move forward, we'll have to go through the public hearings and everything we need to plan for that.
Yeah, I think Planning and Zoning thought that out. I would concur with them.
That's fine as far as I'm concerned. My concern is still the road and the easement, or the right-of-way. In the subdivision ordinance, it says minimum road right-of-way for local service, collector, are all 66-foot right-of-way. That's our own ordinances. We have 33 feet of right-of-way there, correct? 32, 33 feet. How wide is the street going to be going out there? 22 feet? 23
32.
feet?
There's
that?
going to be paved 32.
Paved 32 feet, okay. Where do the lights go? Street lights? 'Cause
We'll have
that's
to check
outside
with
the
Roger.
right-of-way.
Roger's drawing. I'm not sure where Roger is planning on the placement of the streetlights.
Okay, we're gonna need additional land to get there. Do we have that figured out?
We are working on that. We are hoping to start meeting with property owners next week.
Okay, so we're not looking obviously at the railroad, we're looking at,
I have
Fine.
approached the railroad. We cannot get
Yeah,
additional
okay.
right-of-way to the north.
all right. That is, in my opinion, that's number one priority here. We need to get that street figured out. If we can't get a street there, we don't have a project, correct? I think this was a current concern in the past, before my time, for developing out there that right-of-way width. So, anyway,
So we're proposing kind of, just so you know, there's actually 2 sections of right-of-way that we're proposing out there.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but where the existing houses are right now, we are proposing a narrow right-of-way. You know, we're proposing just what we need for what we have out there for utility type of things. Beyond that, once we get beyond that, we get into the property that Nana owns, we would potentially go back to
Right.
the correct right-of-way. Now, the driving surface of the road, we are proposing to keep at 32 the whole time, right?
Yes.
Yep, because it only makes sense to do that contiguously. And actually, you know, we spent a lot of time talking about this in our meeting that Sheila had talked about before, and everyone from a staff perspective felt they were comfortable with it. So, it is kind of a rural section road, and it's kind of what I would determine the end of the line in terms of where you're gonna develop beyond this. It won't develop past it, so we felt comfortable being able to propose the 32-foot road. And then again, getting the additional
Right.
road.
How wide is the road in front of the, what is it, park, the apartments out there? Is that 32?
It's 36.
It's
So it
36.
runs 36 from Munson over to 8th. We are going to keep it at 36. We're hoping to keep it at 36 from 8th to 9th. And it would only narrow starting at
The
the
houses.
houses.
Houses, yeah,
Houses
that's the
out.
only place.
Because obviously we talked about sidewalk, and there will not be a sidewalk ever. If the road gets narrower, obviously you run into people walking on the road, and now your road is a little bit narrower yet. I would assume we'll have no parking, at least on one side of that road.
We would recommend no parking, and we'd actually recommend probably with the speed limit sign being more at 20 or 25 miles per hour.
It's a little odd, you know, it kind of goes against our own ordinances and stuff, but,
So what we gotta do is what we get.
yeah,
All right,
I guess.
on to the next thing, the Sacramento fees.
This is just an update from the Utility Commission. The Utility Commission at its January 9th meeting considered a change to the city's whack-and-sack fees. In your packet, there was a comparison from other cities. We have found recently, especially in talking with multifamily developers, that our whack-and-sack is relatively cheap. And so they were kind of surprised by how affordable our whack-and-sack was. And so we did a little study, we took a look, and where we found we were really different is in how we define unit in multifamily. So for example, you build an apartment building, you have one service, one whack-and-sack. A lot of other cities charge whack-and-sack based on the number of units they have. So if you have a 25-unit apartment building, they would get charged 25 units. So rather than approximately 5,000 to 8,000, it's closer to 30,000 times, that's just whack, and then you have sack. The Planning Commission, or the Utility Commission, took a look at it, and in their opinion, they believe it's really advantageous for Melrose to have affordable whack-and-sack, and that is a real selling point and something that we could emphasize, is that we have much more affordable whack-and-sack than other cities. So they recommended leaving whack-and-sack as it is. They want the staff to make sure that we have our costs covered in terms of, making sure that we have that taken care of, but otherwise leaving it be and not adjusting it to be in line with other cities, and then use that as a development. Their belief is that we take it out in the end use, in monthly, once they're built, the monthly fees. And so that is just an update on whack-and-sack.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you, Sheila. Information items, Public Utilities Commission meeting minutes. Nothing else, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carried.